I arrived at the airport, my heart pounding with anticipation of traveling with my daughter, dreams of family reconciliation, the warm sand of Florida. But there was no one there. I called. "Oh, your flight was supposed to be yesterday. I think you're late." Laughter on the other end of the line. Betrayal from my own flesh and blood. So I made one call. And then I had 87 missed calls, and her trip ended behind bars. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. I was stirring the pasta sauce when the knock came. Sharp, impatient, 3 quick raps that made me jump. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and crossed the small living room, my slippers shuffling against the worn hardwood. Through the peephole, I saw Joanna's face, tight with something I couldn't quite read. Buford loomed behind her, hands shoved in his coat pockets. "Joanna, sweetheart," I said, opening the door wide. "What a surprise. Come in, please?" She brushed past without meeting my eyes, her designer bag swinging from her shoulder. Buford followed, tracking snow onto my entrance mat. He didn't bother with a greeting. "Dad, we need to talk." Joanna's voice had that clipped quality I'd learned to dread over the past year. She dropped her bag onto my kitchen table with a thud that rattled the salt shaker. "Of course. Let me turn down the stove. Can I get you some tea? Coffee?" "We're not here for refreshments." Buford settled into my chair, the one with the cushion molded to my back, and stretched his legs out like he owned the place. A smirk played at the corner of his mouth. I turned off the burner and faced them, my stomach tightening. Joanna was already pulling receipts from her bag, fanning them across the table like evidence at a trial. "Look at these, Dad. Just look." Her finger jabbed at the numbers. "Mortgage, insurance, property taxes, it's crushing us. The house I gave you has those expenses, yes. All homes do. But you own it outright, Joanna. No rent, no landlord. That's not enough anymore." She cut me off, her eyes hard. "You don't understand how expensive everything is. Buford's consulting business had a slow quarter, and we've got obligations. Real obligations." I moved closer to the table, trying to keep my voice steady. "I gave you the home I built with your mother. Every penny I saved went into that property. What more can I— What more?" Buford leaned forward, his tone mocking. "You're sitting in this cozy little apartment with a pension and investments, playing the martyr. Meanwhile, we're scraping by month to month. You've got resources, old man. Time to step up." The word "old" landed like a slap. I felt heat crawl up my neck. "How dare you speak to me that way? I worked 40 years to provide for my family. That house was my retirement security, and I gave it to you both because Joanna is my daughter, and I wanted her to have stability. I won't be talked to like some miser in my own home." Joanna stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "See? This is exactly what Buford said would happen. You get defensive instead of helpful. We need money, Dad, not lectures about your sacrifices." I reached for the folder I kept on my bookshelf, the one with all the property transfer documents. My hands shook slightly as I pulled out the deed copy. "Look at this. I signed over a house worth $400,000. $400,000, and you're calling me stingy?" She snatched the paper from my hand, her face flushed. For a moment she just stared at it, then she tore it clean in half. "You think paperwork impresses me? You think this makes up for not helping when we actually need it?" The sound of ripping paper seemed to echo in my tiny kitchen. I stood frozen, watching the pieces flutter to the floor. "Get out!" My voice came out hoarse. "Both of you. Now." Buford rose slowly, that infuriating smile still in place. "Come on, babe. Let the old guy cool off. He'll come around when he realizes we're serious." They left without another word. The door slammed hard enough to rattle the framed photo of Joanna's college graduation on my wall. I sank into the chair Buford had vacated, still warm from his body, and stared at the torn document on my floor. My daughter's face, twisted with anger and entitlement, kept replaying in my mind. When had she become this person? When had I become disposable? The pasta sauce had gone cold on the stove. I didn't bother reheating it. The next 5 days crawled by in a haze of unanswered calls and restless nights. I kept replaying the argument, searching for the moment I could have said something different, something that would have reached her. But every time I picked up my phone to call Joanna, I set it back down. What would I even say? On the morning of January 20th, I forced myself out for my usual run through Lincoln Park. The cold bit at my face and patches of ice made the path treacherous, but I needed to move, needed to feel something other than this hollow ache in my chest. I was halfway around the loop when my phone buzzed in my jacket pocket. A text from Margaret, my former colleague from the real estate firm. We'd stayed friendly over the years, occasionally meeting for coffee to swap stories about retirement. Her message was short. "Cornelius, are you okay? Saw something concerning online? Call me when you can." I stopped mid-stride, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. My fingers fumbled with the screen as I opened my messaging app and typed back, "What did you see?" Her response came quickly. "Check your daughter's social media. I'm sorry you had to find out this way." My chest constricted. I turned and walked briskly back toward my apartment, my running shoes crunching through the snow. The 15-minute walk felt endless. Once inside, I shook off my jacket and went straight to my computer, an old desktop that took forever to boot up. My hands trembled as I typed Joanna's name into the search bar. There it was, posted 2 days ago. A photo of the house, the beautiful brick colonial, with the maple tree in front that I'd planted when Joanna was 6. The caption read, "When your dad gives you a generous gift, but acts like Scrooge when you actually need help. Family drama. Stingy old man." 43 likes, 18 comments, most from people I didn't recognize, making jokes about boomer entitlement and holding on to every penny. I sat back in my chair, the room spinning slightly. She'd put our private conflict on display for strangers to mock. My own daughter. I dialed her number before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the 4th ring. "Dad." "What?" "Why would you post that, Joanna? Why air our family business to the entire world?" "Oh, God." I heard rustling like she was shifting position. "It's social media, Dad. Everyone vents online. Don't make it a bigger deal than it is." "A bigger deal? You called me a stingy old man in front of hundreds of people." "It was a joke. You're being dramatic, as usual. Look, I've got a meeting in 10 minutes. Can we not do this right now?" My throat tightened. "This hurts me, Joanna. Deeply. Whatever issues we have, we should resolve them privately, not through public humiliation. You always make everything about your feelings." Her voice had gone flat, detached. "Maybe if you actually helped instead of playing the victim, I wouldn't need to vent." "Joanna." The line went dead. She'd hung up on me. I set the phone down carefully on my desk and stared at the screen, at my daughter's smiling profile picture. That photo was from last Christmas, taken in my living room. She'd been laughing at something Buford said, her eyes bright. Had she already despised me then? Had every smile been a lie? The apartment felt smaller somehow, the walls pressing in. I needed air, but I'd just been outside. I needed answers, but Joanna clearly wouldn't give them. All I had was this gnawing certainty that something fundamental had broken between us, and I didn't know how to fix it, or if it even could be fixed. Over the next 2 weeks, I tried to lose myself in routine. Morning runs, afternoon chess games at the community center, evening documentaries. But Joanna's words echoed in every quiet moment. "You always make everything about your feelings," as if my feelings didn't matter, as if I was just an obstacle to her comfort. On the evening of February 5th, I skipped the community center and stayed home. I set up my personal chess set, the wooden one with hand-carved pieces that my father had given me 50 years ago. I didn't have an opponent, but I played both sides anyway, moving pieces slowly while my mind wandered. Buford. This all traced back to Buford. I remembered meeting him at the engagement party 3 years ago. Joanna had been radiant in a blue dress, introducing her fiancé, with obvious pride. Buford had given me a firm handshake and an appraising look, the kind real estate agents give a property before deciding if it's worth their time. "So you're the legendary Cornelius," he'd said. "Joanna tells me you built quite the empire in Chicago real estate." "I did well enough," I'd replied modestly. "Enough to retire comfortably and leave something for my daughter." His eyes had sharpened at that. "Smart man. Family legacy is everything." At the time, I'd thought he appreciated family values. Now I understood he'd been calculating my net worth. I moved a black knight, capturing my own white bishop. In chess, you had to think several moves ahead, anticipate your opponent's strategy. I hadn't done that with Buford. I'd been too happy that Joanna seemed happy. too relieved she'd found someone after her divorce. I hadn't looked closer at the man behind the charm, the engagement party, the wedding, those first family dinners. I replayed them all, searching for the turning point. It came about 18 months ago. Buford had mentioned his consulting firm was expanding. He'd asked my opinion on leveraging property for business capital. I'd advised caution, suggesting he build the business slowly without taking on dangerous debt. He'd smiled and nodded, but his eyes had gone cold. Conservative approach. That's one way to do it. After that, Joanna started pulling away. Fewer calls, shorter visits, and when we did talk, there was always an edge to her voice, an impatience that hadn't been there before, like I was wasting her time. A knock at my door startled me from my thoughts. I glanced at the clock, 8:30, too late for social calls. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty except for an envelope on my doormat. No postage, just my name written in Joanna's looping handwriting. I brought it inside and tore it open. A single sheet of paper with a bulleted list. Dad, since you won't answer my calls, here's what we need. $15,000 for roof repairs. Your gift house has issues. $8,000 to cover Buford's business expenses this quarter. $5,000 for upcoming property taxes. Total, $28,000. We need this by March 1st. If you actually care about me, you'll help. J, $28,000. Demanded like I was an ATM. No please, no acknowledgement of what I'd already sacrificed. Just entitlement and a deadline. I crumpled the letter in my fist and walked to the window. Outside, snow was falling again, coating the street in fresh white. Somewhere out there, my daughter was living in the house I'd built, sleeping in rooms I'd painted, walking on floors I'd refinished, and she thought I was her enemy. No, not her enemy, Buford's enemy. And somehow he'd convinced her I was the villain in this story. I smoothed out the letter and read it again. The phrasing, the tone, it didn't sound like Joanna. It sounded like someone else's words coming out of her mouth, poison spreading through her thoughts. I returned to my chess set and studied the board. Sometimes, in chess, you had to sacrifice a piece to win the game. You had to let your opponent think they were winning, right up until the moment you trapped their king. I wasn't ready to give up on my daughter, but I also wasn't going to be played for a fool anymore. The next 2 weeks blurred into a strange routine. I ran my morning loops through Lincoln Park, made small talk with neighbors in the building's mailroom, watched documentaries about Arctic explorers and ancient civilizations, anything to occupy my mind. I didn't call Joanna. She didn't call me. The silence between us felt like a living thing, growing heavier each day. On the morning of February 20th, I was at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee and reading the Tribune when my phone rang. Joanna's name flashed on the screen. My hand hesitated over the phone. Part of me wanted to let it go to voicemail, to protect myself from whatever fresh wound she might inflict, but she was still my daughter. "Hello, sweetheart?" "Hey, Dad." Her voice was bright, almost cheerful. The shift was so jarring I nearly dropped the phone. "Listen, I've been thinking. Things got pretty heated last time, and I hate how we left things. So here's what I want to propose. A family trip. Florida. Late May. You, me, Buford, and his parents. A week at the beach, nice resort. Time to reconnect as a family." I sat very still, processing. Florida? South Beach, specifically. I've already looked at hotels. There's this gorgeous place right on the ocean. Buford found a great deal. We'd fly out together, all of us. Make it a proper vacation. What do you say? My first instinct was suspicion. After everything, the demands, the torn papers, the social media humiliation, why this sudden olive branch? But beneath the wariness, hope stirred. Maybe she'd realized how badly she'd treated me. Maybe this was her way of apologizing without saying the words directly. "When exactly in May?" I asked carefully. "Probably around the 20th. We're still finalizing dates, but I wanted to run it by you first. Make sure you're available." She paused. "I know we've had our issues, Dad, but family is family, right? We should try to move past this. Family is family." The words twisted something in my chest. I wanted so badly to believe her. "That sounds nice, Joanna. Really nice. Count me in." "Perfect. I'll send you all the details once we book everything. Flight info, hotel, the whole package. This'll be good for us, Dad. A fresh start. After we hung up, I sat staring at my coffee. The newspaper lay forgotten. A trip to Florida, with Joanna, Buford, and his parents. The idea filled me with equal parts hope and dread. Ambrose and Harriet Bradley. I'd met them exactly 3 times, and each encounter had left a sour taste. But maybe, in a neutral setting, away from Chicago, away from the financial pressures, we could find our way back to each other. I pulled my wall calendar down and marked May 20th with a circle, my hand steadier than it had been in weeks. One chance. That's all I wanted. One chance to reconnect with my daughter before it was too late. 5 days later, I found myself in a downtown cafe I used to frequent, with colleagues years ago. The place hadn't changed much. Same exposed brick walls, same mismatched furniture, same smell of roasted coffee beans that hit you the moment you walked in. I'd needed to get out of the apartment, away from my own thoughts. I ordered a black coffee and claimed a table by the window. Outside, pedestrians hurried past in their winter coats, breath visible in the cold air. Inside, the cafe hummed with quiet conversation and the hiss of the espresso machine. I thought about Ambrose and Harriet Bradley. The first time I'd met them was at the engagement party, the same event where I'd met Buford. Ambrose had given me a firm handshake and an appraising look, as if calculating my net worth with his eyes. Within 10 minutes of conversation, he'd made 3 separate comments about people from modest backgrounds and knowing one's place. I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe his brusque manner was just awkwardness. The second meeting at the wedding rehearsal dinner eliminated any doubt. Harriet had cornered me by the bar and spent 20 minutes explaining, in excruciating detail, how their family maintained certain standards, and how important it was that Joanna not slip backward financially. The implication was clear. I was the backward slip, the anchor around their son's prospects. But it was the third encounter, a stilted dinner at their home in Evanston 6 months after the wedding, that solidified my understanding. Ambrose had held court at the head of his mahogany dining table, pontificating about fiscal responsibility, while his wife nodded along like a wind-up toy. "You were in real estate, weren't you, Cornelius?" he'd said, swirling brandy in an oversized glass. "Must have been quite the adjustment, going from broker to retirement." The pause before retirement had been deliberate, loaded with condescension. "I did well enough to retire comfortably," I'd replied evenly. "That was always the goal." Of course, though one wonders about legacy planning, making sure the next generation has proper resources, not just adequate ones. Buford had smirked into his wineglass. Joanna had looked at her plate. I'd finished my dinner in silence and left as soon as politely possible. Now, sitting in this cafe with steam rising from my coffee cup, I wondered what spending a week with Ambrose and Harriet would be like. Would they treat me with the same thinly veiled contempt? Or would the beach setting, the vacation atmosphere, soften everyone's edges? I took a long sip of coffee. Maybe the trip would give me a chance to observe them more closely, to understand what kind of people had raised Buford. Maybe I'd see something, some crack in their facade, that would help me understand what my daughter had gotten herself into. The cafe door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. I pulled my jacket tighter and watched the street outside, planning nothing, just observing. Sometimes observation was enough. April arrived with the kind of warmth that made Chicagoans forget winter entirely. By the 10th, trees along my street had budded green, and people walked without heavy coats for the first time in months. I spent the morning at a department store on Michigan Avenue, methodically selecting clothes for Florida. Lightweight shirts, khaki shorts, a new pair of sandals. The saleswoman, a cheerful woman in her 30s, chatted while ringing up my purchases. "Beach vacation?" "Family trip to Miami," I said, handing her my card. "Oh, how lovely. Nothing like family time in the sun." I smiled non-committally and took my bags. "Lovely. Sure." Back at my apartment, I spread everything out on my bed. The clothes looked foreign somehow, too casual, too optimistic. I'd become accustomed to long sleeves and closed-toe shoes, the practical uniform of Chicago life. These items, bright blue shirt, tan shorts, belonged to a different version of me, one unburdened by family drama. I was folding the shirts into my suitcase when my phone rang. Buford's name appeared on the screen. I considered ignoring it, but curiosity won out. Hello? Cornelius. Just wanted to touch base about the trip. His voice carried that false heartiness he used when pretending to be friendly. Got your flight info, yeah? May 20th, United Flight 842. Departing O'Hare at 2 p.m. Joanna sent me the details last week. Great, great. Just making sure everything's squared away. Wouldn't want any confusion. He paused, and I heard ice clinking in a glass. Drinking already, and it wasn't even noon. Few tips for you, old man. Remember to bring your medications, yeah? High blood pressure and all that. Humidity in Florida can be tough on folks your age. Maybe pack some extra heart pills just in case. The condescension dripped from every word. Old man, your age. As if I were some doddering fool who couldn't manage a simple trip. I've traveled plenty, Buford. I'll manage just fine. Sure you will, sure you will. Just looking out for my father-in-law. The way he said it made the relationship sound like a burden. Anyway, we're all excited. Gonna be a great week. Quality family bonding and all that. I'm looking forward to it, I lied. Yeah. Well, see you at the airport. Don't be late. You know how security lines are these days. Might want to get there extra early, considering... He trailed off deliberately, letting the implication hang. Considering your age. Considering you might get confused. Considering you're not quite capable. I'll be there on time, I said flatly. He chuckled. Course you will. All right. Gotta run. Catch you on the 20th. The line went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, staring at my half-packed suitcase. His voice echoed in my head. Don't be late. As if I'd ever been late for anything important in my 68 years. I set the phone down carefully on my nightstand and returned to packing. Each item went into the suitcase with deliberate precision. Shirts folded, shorts rolled. Toiletries secured in a plastic bag. I would be prepared. I would be punctual. I would be everything they thought I wasn't. And maybe, just maybe, I'd finally see them clearly too. The weeks leading to May 15th passed in careful preparation. I reviewed my medications, double-checked my passport despite knowing it was current, and read reviews of Miami beaches I'd probably never visit. Each day brought a mixture of anticipation and unease, like standing at the edge of something I couldn't quite see. The morning of the 15th arrived clear and warm, Chicago finally shaking off spring's chill. I'd barely slept, too aware of the day ahead. By 7 a.m., I was dressed and ready, my packed suitcase standing by the door like a loyal sentinel. At 9:30, I called a taxi. The driver, a talkative man in his 50s, kept up a steady stream of chatter during the 40-minute drive to O'Hare. I gave him brief responses, my attention focused on the skyline receding behind us and the massive airport complex growing ahead. My phone showed 10:42 a.m. when we pulled up to Terminal 1 United Departures. Have a good flight, the driver said cheerfully as I handed him cash. I pulled my suitcase from the trunk and headed through the automatic doors into chaos. O'Hare on a Thursday morning was a symphony of rolling luggage, gate announcements, and hundreds of travelers moving with urgent purpose. I made my way to the departure board, scanning the listings for United 842 to Miami. 2 p.m. departure. Nothing. I checked again, running my finger down the screen. Los Angeles, Denver, Houston, San Francisco. No Miami at 2 p.m. No flight 842. My chest tightened. I rolled my suitcase to the United counter, where a young woman with her hair pulled into a tight bun was helping an elderly couple. I waited, watching the clock tick to 10:56, then 11:03. Finally, she turned to me with a professional smile. How can I help you today? I pulled out my printed confirmation. Joanna had emailed it weeks ago and slid it across the counter. I'm looking for my flight, United 842 to Miami, departing at 2 p.m., but it's not on the board. She scanned the paper, her fingers moving across her keyboard. The smile faded into something more neutral, careful. Sir, this flight, it departed yesterday, May 14th at 2 p.m. Yesterday? The word came out sharper than I intended. That's impossible. My daughter specifically told me May 15th. I have the date right here. I tapped the confirmation. She leaned closer to her screen, squinting. I see the booking here, but the actual flight date was the 14th. This ticket shows you were checked in as a no-show yesterday. Her tone shifted to something resembling pity. I'm sorry, sir, but you missed your flight. The terminal noise seemed to swell around me. Announcements, conversations, the endless rolling of suitcase wheels. I stood there with my printed confirmation, proof of nothing, and felt the first cold fingers of realization creeping up my spine. Check again, I said quietly. Please. She did, her expression growing more uncomfortable. Same result, I'm afraid. Is there someone you can call? Family traveling with you? Family? Yes, I had family somewhere. On a beach in Florida, probably. Without me. I stepped away from the counter, pulling my phone from my jacket pocket, with hands that felt disconnected from my body. Around me, travelers rushed past with their destination certainties, their correct flight times, their functioning family relationships. I found Joanna's number and pressed call. It rang 4 times, long enough that I started composing a voicemail message in my head, something calm and reasonable, asking what had happened. Then she picked up. Dad, hey! Her voice was bright, almost singing. Too bright. In the background, I heard other voices, laughter, the distant crash of waves. Joanna, I'm at O'Hare. The flight. They're saying it left yesterday. That can't be right. I have May 15th written down. You told me... Oh. A pause, stretching out like taffy. Then with an airiness that made my stomach drop. Oops. Your flight was yesterday, wasn't it? Looks like you missed it. Oops. As if I'd forgotten to pick up milk. As if this were a small, amusing mishap. What? I couldn't form more words. My grip tightened on the phone until my knuckles went white. Yeah, we're already here. Got in last night, actually. The beach is gorgeous, Dad. You should see it. She wasn't even trying to sound sorry. There was movement on her end, muffled sounds, and then laughter. Male laughter, unmistakable. Buford's voice, slightly drunk already. Did the old-timer really fall for it? More laughter, deeper, rougher, Ambrose, and a woman's titter that could only be Harriet. Joanna! My voice came out hoarse. Are you telling me you gave me the wrong date on purpose? Oh, don't be so dramatic, Dad. Now her tone shifted to something annoyed, defensive. It was just a mix-up. These things happen. Maybe you should have double-checked your dates. You know how forgetful you can get at your age. In the background, Buford again. Tell him we're having cocktails on the beach. Tell him about the view. She giggled. Actually giggled. Look, we've got to go. Pool bar's calling. Sorry about the confusion, okay? Maybe next time pay more attention to your ticket. Joanna, wait. The line went dead. I stood there in the middle of Terminal 1 with my phone still pressed to my ear, listening to nothing. Around me, life continued. A child wailing 3 gates over, an automated voice announcing boarding for Seattle. 2 businessmen arguing about a delayed connection. Normal airport chaos. Normal people having normal problems. I lowered my phone slowly and looked at the screen. My daughter's contact photo smiled up at me, taken last Christmas in my apartment, before everything fell apart, before I understood what kind of people I was dealing with. My suitcase stood beside me, packed with beach clothes I wouldn't need, sunscreen for a trip I'd never take, hope I'd carefully folded between each shirt. I'd been so careful, so prepared. I'd done exactly what they'd told me to do, arrived exactly when they'd instructed, trusted exactly as a father should trust his daughter. And they'd laughed, all of them together, while I stood alone in an airport holding a useless ticket. The realization settled over me like cold water. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This was deliberate, calculated. A game they'd planned and executed while I'd spent weeks looking forward to reconciliation. I gripped my suitcase handle and started walking toward the exit, each step mechanical, automatic. The taxi lines stretched long in the pickup area. I took my place at the end and waited, breathing carefully, keeping my expression neutral, even though something inside me was hardening into something new. The taxi ride home passed in silence. The driver, an older woman this time, seemed to sense my mood and didn't attempt conversation. I sat in the back seat, watching Chicago slide by through the window. Familiar streets, familiar buildings, a familiar life that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. Someone who didn't understand what his own daughter was capable of. We pulled up to my building at 12:37 p.m. I paid, carried my suitcase through the lobby, and took the elevator to my floor. Mrs. Chen from 4B was in the hallway, watering her plant on her doorstep. "Back already, Mr. Hart? I thought you were going on vacation." "Change of plans," I said, unlocking my door. "Have a good day, Mrs. Chen." Inside my apartment, everything looked exactly as I'd left it. The breakfast dishes still in the sink. The newspaper folded on the coffee table. The chess set on my side table. Pieces frozen mid-game from weeks ago. I set my suitcase down and stood in the quiet, letting the stillness wash over me. Then I walked to my bedroom closet, pushed aside the hanging coats, and knelt by my small safe on the floor. My fingers worked the combination lock automatically. My late wife's birthday, unchanged in all these years. The safe clicked open. Inside were the documents I'd kept for decades. Property deeds, insurance papers, my will, and beneath those, newer additions. Papers I'd gathered over the past 3 months, ever since I'd started paying attention to details I'd previously ignored. I pulled out a manila folder and opened it on my bed. First, printouts from the county assessor's office showing that my house, the one I'd gifted to Joanna, had been refinanced twice in the past year. She'd taken out loans against it, loans I'd never authorized but that she could legally secure as the owner. Current debt on the property, nearly $200,000. Second, bank statements I'd obtained through connections I'd maintained in the real estate world. Buford's consulting firm had been investigated for financial irregularities 6 months ago. No charges filed, but the complaint documents were public record. Clients claiming improper investment advice, missing funds, pressure tactics. Third, a private investigator's report. I'd hired him in March, after that awful phone call where Joanna had hung up on me. The investigator had been thorough. Buford had gambling debts at 3 different casinos. Ambrose had been fired from his banking job years ago for ethical violations, not retired as he claimed. Harriet had been treated twice for prescription medication abuse. And fourth, the email exchange I'd discovered by pure accident. In late March, I'd stopped by the house, my former house, to drop off some mail that had still been coming to my apartment. Joanna hadn't been home, but her laptop had been open on the kitchen table, unlocked. I'd only meant to close it to protect it from their cat, but I'd seen the email preview on the screen, from Buford to his parents. "The old fool actually thinks we want him on the trip. Flight's the 14th, we'll tell him the 15th. By the time he figures it out, we'll be halfway through the vacation. Joanna thinks it's hilarious." I'd stood in that kitchen, my kitchen that I'd remodeled 10 years ago, reading that email, and something inside me had gone very quiet and very cold. I'd taken a photo with my phone. Then I'd closed the laptop, left the mail on the counter, and walked out. For the past 6 weeks, I'd known exactly what they were planning. I'd packed my suitcase anyway, gone to the airport anyway, played my part in their cruel little theater, because I needed them to do it. I needed them to execute their plan, to laugh at me over that phone line, to leave evidence of their malice. I needed them to feel clever and safe and completely in control. Now, sitting in my bedroom with documents spread across the quilt my wife had made 30 years ago, I picked up my phone. Not to call Joanna this time. Time to make a different kind of call. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed, Cleo Andrews. We'd worked together 20 years ago on a complicated commercial real estate deal that had gone sideways when one party tried to forge documents. Cleo had been the attorney who'd sorted through the mess, and we'd stayed friendly afterward, meeting for lunch every few months to swap stories about retirement and grandchildren. Well, her grandchildren. She'd always asked about Joanna. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Cornelius, this is a pleasant surprise. How are you?" "Not pleasant, I'm afraid." I kept my voice level. "I need your help, Cleo. Legal help." Her tone shifted immediately, professional instincts kicking in. "What's happened?" I spent the next 20 minutes walking her through everything: the financial demands, the social media humiliation, the deliberately falsified travel dates, the evidence I'd collected, the refinancing documents showing Joanna had taken out massive loans against property I'd gifted her, the investigator's report on Buford's gambling debts and questionable business practices, Ambrose's hidden termination for ethics violations, the email proving premeditated fraud. "They're in Miami right now," I finished, laughing about how they tricked me, using money from those illegal refinancings to fund their vacation while I stood alone in an airport. Cleo was quiet for a moment. I heard papers rustling, the click of a keyboard. The refinancing without your knowledge is actionable. You were still listed as a co-signer on the original mortgage. That's fraud. And if Buford's been giving investment advice while under investigation, that's securities fraud. Add in the pattern of financial manipulation and elder abuse. She paused. Cornelius, you have grounds for criminal charges. Multiple charges. I want them to face consequences. My hand tightened on the phone. Real consequences. Not just a slap on the wrist. Send me everything. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence. I have contacts with both the state attorney's office and federal investigators who handle financial crimes. This crosses state lines, which makes it federal jurisdiction. They take elder financial abuse very seriously. I pulled out my laptop and began scanning documents, attaching files, forwarding the investigator's report. Each click of the mouse felt deliberate, final. This was it, the moment I'd been preparing for since I'd seen that email on Joanna's laptop 2 months ago. Got them, Cleo said. Give me a few hours. I'll make some calls tonight, get things moving. They're staying at a resort in South Beach? The Fontainebleau, under Buford's name. Perfect. Cornelius, are you sure about this? Once I make these calls, there's no taking it back. Your daughter will be involved. Arrested, potentially. I looked at the torn property deed still lying on my kitchen counter, where it had been since January. The 2 pieces never thrown away, preserved as evidence. She made her choice, Cleo. Now I'm making mine. All right, then. I'll call you tomorrow with updates. Try to get some rest. Rest. I hung up and sat in the growing darkness of my apartment, not bothering to turn on lights. Somewhere in Florida, my daughter was probably having dinner by the pool, maybe another round of drinks, celebrating her clever deception. She had no idea what was coming. I felt no satisfaction yet, just a cold, clear certainty that I'd done what needed to be done. Night passed in restless fragments. I dozed in my chair, startled awake by every car door slamming outside, every creak of the building settling. By 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee, standing by my kitchen window as dawn broke pink and gold over Chicago's skyline. At 10:47 a.m., my phone rang. Joanna. I watched it vibrate across my kitchen table, her smiling contact photo from last Christmas mocking me. I didn't answer. It rang again at 10:51, Buford this time, then 10:53, Joanna again. 11:02, a number I didn't recognize but with a Florida area code, probably the resort's phone. 11:15, Ambrose. 11:17, Harriet. I silenced my phone and set it face down. By noon, I had 43 missed calls. By 2 p.m., 61. The voicemails started piling up, each notification a small vibration I felt but didn't check. I made myself a sandwich, ate it methodically, washed the plate. The phone buzzed constantly on the counter like an angry wasp trapped under glass. At 3:18 p.m., curiosity finally won. I picked up the phone and opened my voicemail. 87 missed calls total. I pressed play on the first message. Dad, it's me. Joanna's voice, higher than usual, strained. I need you to call me back immediately. Something's happened. There's been a mistake. Just, please call me. Delete. Next message. Cornelius, this is Ambrose Bradley. Formal, clipped. I don't know what you think you're doing, but you need to call this off right now. This is a family matter. We can discuss this reasonably. Delete. Next. Dad, please! Joanna again, crying now. They came to the hotel, the police. They're saying things about fraud, and I don't understand. What did you do? What have you done? You have to fix this. What have you done? As if I were the villain in this story. I deleted that one too and opened my laptop instead. A quick search for Miami Beach arrests brought up a local news site. There, buried on page 3, 4 tourists detained at luxury resort on fraud charges. The article was brief, no names yet, but the details matched. Federal investigators, financial fraud, elder abuse allegations, cooperative investigation between Illinois and Florida authorities. All 4 individuals being held pending arraignment. I read it twice, then closed the laptop. My hands were steady. My heart rate, normal. I felt neither triumph nor grief, just a profound, settling quiet. The phone buzzed again. Joanna. 88th call. I let it ring through to voicemail, watching the notification appear, then disappear as she hung up without leaving a message this time. Outside my window, the city moved on. Taxis honked. Pedestrians crossed at the light. Somewhere a siren wailed briefly, then faded. Normal Thursday afternoon sounds. My phone lit up with a text message preview. Dad, please, I'm begging you. They won't let us leave the hotel. There are agents here, please. I turned the phone face down again and went to make myself a fresh cup of coffee. The silence in my apartment felt different now. Not lonely, just peaceful. 4 days later, on a Tuesday morning that felt no different from any other Tuesday morning, Cleo called. It's done, she said simply. Well, mostly done. The wheels of justice turn slowly, but they're turning. I settled into my chair with my coffee. Outside, a street cleaner rumbled past. Tell me. All 4 were arrested Thursday evening at their hotel. Federal charges of wire fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud, plus state charges of elder financial abuse and theft by deception. The evidence you provided was damning, especially that email. Premeditation is a prosecutor's dream. She paused, and I heard papers shuffling. Buford's in the deepest trouble. His business was already under investigation, and this added fuel. They found evidence he'd been systematically draining client accounts to cover his gambling debts. Joanna's implicated as an accessory since she helped refinance the house using forged documents. And Ambrose and Harriet? Conspiracy charges. They were in that email chain, actively participated in planning the deception, and there's phone records of them discussing how to extract money from you. Plus, Ambrose's history of financial misconduct came back to haunt him. Turns out he's been involved in similar schemes before. I absorbed this, watching a bird land on my windowsill. What happens now? Arraignment hearing was yesterday. All 4 pled not guilty, but the evidence is overwhelming. Bail was set at $50,000 each. Buford's parents made theirs, but Buford and Joanna are still in custody. They couldn't raise the funds. Cleo's voice softened slightly. Your daughter tried to call you as a character witness. The court asked if you'd be willing to testify on her behalf. What did you tell them? That you'd testify, but for the prosecution, not the defense. The judge noted it in the record. My coffee had gone cold. I set the cup down carefully. The house? Already filed emergency motions to reverse the fraudulent refinancing. The loans were taken out under false pretenses with forged cosigner documents. That's textbook fraud. The bank's cooperating fully. You should have the property back in your name within 60 days. Free and clear. The debt dies with the fraud charges. 4 months ago, I'd stood in that house, my house, and signed it over to my daughter because I loved her and wanted her to have security. She'd taken that gift and weaponized it, turned it into leverage for lies and manipulation, and borrowed money she'd never intended to repay. Cornelius, you still there? I'm here. My voice came out rougher than I intended. What's the timeline for trial? 6 to 8 months, likely, but honestly, I think they'll take a plea deal. The evidence is airtight, and going to trial would just mean harsher sentences. They're looking at 2 to 5 years each, possibly more for Buford. 2 to 5 years. My daughter, in prison. The woman I'd raised, taught to ride a bike, walked down the aisle at her first wedding, comforted through her divorce. Now she'd be wearing an orange jumpsuit because she'd chosen cruelty over kindness, greed over love. Thank you, Cleo, for everything. You did the right thing, hard thing, but right. She hesitated. How are you doing? Really? I looked around my small apartment, the chess set still on the side table, the family photo on the wall that I'd need to take down soon, the suitcase still packed by my door because I hadn't had the heart to unpack it yet. I searched for the right word. Not happy, not vindicated, just, I'm free? After we hung up, I walked to my suitcase and finally opened it. The beach clothes looked ridiculous now, artifacts from a different reality. I pulled them out one by one and started a pile for donation. These things belonged to a version of me who still believed in redemption through patience, who thought love could overcome manipulation. That version was gone. I wasn't sure yet who I'd be instead, but I had time to figure it out. All the time in the world, actually. Time that was mine again, unencumbered by demands and schemes and false hopes. I zipped the empty suitcase closed and stored it in my closet. Then I sat down at my chess set and finally finished the game I'd abandoned back in February. Checkmate in 4 moves, just like I'd planned. If you liked this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.